Hey folks, I suppose many of you who are going for a behavioral interview have heard the question, tell me about your biggest achievement. This question may sound different. What project are you most proud of and why? Tell me about a time when you wanted to change something that was outside of your daily scope of work. When an interviewer asks you such questions, they expect to hear a story when you made a thoughtful decision, implemented it, and saw an outcome. Many candidates struggle with this question. I've often heard complaints like, what should I say if I just do my day-to-day work and never participate in exciting projects? Or I work at a company that builds simple websites. It's impossible to find an interesting case from that. Does it sound familiar? My name is Dima, I'm a senior frontend developer based in Berlin. And today we will discuss how to be prepared for those and similar questions. Candidates usually start to prepare for the behavioral interview when they get a message from a recruiter or when they decided to change their job. To successfully pass the behavioral part, you should start to prepare long before the interview. Ideally, right now, right after you finish this video. If you ask me what exactly you should do, I will answer that you need to create cases. A case is a situation where you design a solution for a problem, implement or manage the implementation, and get some results, either positive or negative. Ideally, you should also learn something from this case. Cases will be your foundation in preparation for the behavioral interview process. The thing is, you can take a good story from your career, wrap it into a pretty wrapper, and present it in the interview. The job is done. But to do it, you should have these stories. Also, your stories should be remarkable. It's good for a career if they're impressive. If you are able to impress the interviewer, you would probably get a better position and a higher salary. The case is the foundation of your story. By having a good case, the rest of the work is simple. On the internet, you will find many videos and articles on how to present your work. The opposite is also true. If you're a master of presentation and a brilliant speaker but don't have a good case in your career, you will simply have nothing to present. Now, when I hope everybody understands the importance of good cases, let's move to its structure. We start with a design document. You might say that it's an optional step, and I agree that in some small companies, a design document might not be required. But in most of the companies, design document is a mandatory step before jumping to the realization. The design document is a central place where you and your colleagues can collaboratively meditate on the problem. When it's done, it will be archived and it will allow us to save the history of all decisions made by the company. Also, a design document can be written down in a short time compared to the development. So there is a higher chance that your team can allocate time for it. The next part is an implementation. It's not good if you didn't participate actively in the implementation process. Basically, how can you say if the solution was good or bad if you haven't developed it? If you cannot take a part in the development process because you have a manager's role, you should at least take control over the process or be an advisor who helps others to implement your ideas. The outcome is the result of the implementation. Basically, the outcome is one of the main reasons why the design document was created. The outcome might be positive, negative, or in the middle. If it's a good outcome, it's a case for the question about your achievements. If it's a bad outcome, for example, you weren't able to achieve all your goals that you are set in the design document, it will be a case for the question about your failures. The last part of the case is learning. Work on the case may have gone well or badly, but most likely not perfectly. In almost any case, you can extract some learning. What went bad? What would you change next time? Which goals were not achieved and why? As always, on the behavioral interview, keep focus on your learning, your failures, and your achievements. You shouldn't tell the interviewer that your team failed to implement your brilliant idea. A good case will help you not only with questions mentioned previously, but also with many other behavioral questions. When you are working on a complex solution, it will require interaction with your colleagues, other teams, and stakeholders. Such interactions generate many interesting situations that you can share in the interview. Why do interviewers ask this question? What do they want to know? It's an important thing to know because you should understand on which part you should focus. Interviewers usually ask these questions because they want to know, do you have an experience designing complex solutions? Are you proactive? Are you willing to take responsibility for long term solutions? What real results have you achieved? How many cases would be enough for the interview? I think it would be great to have 3 to 4 strong cases. It's a good habit to have your cases written down and back to them periodically for review. Some cases may become weaker than newer ones and should be removed. The next part is about how to create a good case. And before we will be able to answer this question, we need to know what a good case is. So let's look at the characteristic of the good case. It's specific. The case should have a clearly understood outcome. We wanted to replace REST API with a GraphQL API. I started to work on it, but after that, urgent task was coming, so I postponed the migration. Is an example of a bad case. It's a good to show a finalized work. For example, instead of saying that you just partially migrated the API, you can say that you have migrated 2 services and moved on to results. The results are measurable. If you have any numbers, use them. Avoid words like good or bad, fast or slow. In the case above, do not say that you have migrated some services to the new API. Instead, say that you have migrated 2 or 4 services or 50% of all services. When you have figures, it shows that you know what you did and what the real outcome was. The problem aligns with the company's mission. You shouldn't do something only because you want to practice or because you want to add a beautiful line to your resume. A good case should be useful for your project and your company. And the last one is that the case should be completed. When you finish a design document but the implementation is not done, it's not a good example. The good case have passed all stages: design, development, and outcome. 2 more things about a good case. Leading role. You should have played a leading role or handled the most complex part of the work. At this stage, we're not evaluating the team results unless it is for a leadership role, so focus on your impact, above and beyond. A good case is something you did outside your daily duties. You took the initiative and either achieved better than expected results or learned something new. What also makes the case strong for you is mostly positive outcomes. It's nice to have 1 or 2 failures in your story back, but your answers shouldn't be only about failures because you don't want to look like a loser. At the same time, you won't look like a person who can admit their failures and overcome them. How do we generate cases? We have 2 ways. The first one is the active way. It means that we actively observe everything around us all the time to find a problematic places that is worth fixing. Here are some examples of what can become a good foundation for the case. Known problem that affects other team. Annoying problem that no one wants to fix. Unknown problem, but you believe it is worth pointing out. Rational improvement of some aspects of the application. The second approach is passive. You can simply wait for a good case to appear. And in the K moment, you must say, yes, I will take it. Good cases appear if you're working in the right company, you're working on the right team, you're working on the right project, and also you have enough experience to be chosen for this job. The problem with the passive approach is that it may never happen and you may not showcase your initiative. As you may guess, a passive approach is not our way. We will act proactively. But the question is, how can you be good at identifying problems? To be good at it, we need just 2 things. The first one is theory. Theory means you need a broad enough knowledge base about the areas you want to improve. To propose good ideas, you need to be aware of them. For example, if you're working with REST API and encounter issues with over or under fetching, You might consider GraphQL as a better solution. But to even think of GraphQL, you need to know it exists and where it might be useful. And the second one is practice. Practice means you need to work on many complex things. Do not hesitate to volunteer for new projects or initiatives. The more experience you gain, the more opportunities you will find for improvement. Also, you will become a more experienced engineer who will be allowed to work in more important areas. Let's say we found a problem. Next, we will start on the design document. There are many of them, but today I will focus on RFC, or Request for Comments. If you aren't familiar with it, RFC is a team's decision-making tool. In our context, RFC is a tool for generating cases. As a good case, good RFC should align with your company goals and your project's roadmap. RFC consists of three main parts. Overview. Describe the problem you are trying to solve, why it is a problem, and how it affects the team, company, or project. Solution. Explain the final decision, why you choose a particular option and why you discarded others. Consider alternatives. Outline different options for solving the problem, including the pros and cons of each. It doesn't mean there cannot be other parts. Each RFC is individual. Some of them require more details and others can be shorter, but these three parts are mandatory. RFC is not a silver bullet and will not work in all cases. RFC will not be very useful for companies with a top-down approach where decisions are made at the top and handed down for implementation, because in such companies, developers just don't have enough influence to push their solutions. Also, RFCs will not work very well in a non-collaborative environments, where people hesitate or do not want to share their thoughts. RFC thrive in collaborative environments that value distributed decision making. It might be hard to understand what RFC is if you have never used it before, so let's look at the example. Imagine you're working on a React project and you find out that it might be beneficial to add a state manager to the project. Adding a state manager is a complex change that affects the whole team and requires many hours of work to implement. It's unlikely that a manager would approve such a significant amount of work without a clear problem description, a defined goal, estimation, how long it takes, and a description of the beneficial outcome. We start with a problem's description. It should be clear and understandable for the person who is not familiar with the context. Besides the problem definition, we also need to emphasize why it's a problem. In our case, we show that lack of state management on the project leads to hard-to-track bugs, inconsistent user experience, and state transitions across multiple components, making app logic harder to maintain. Our goal is to convince both technical and non-technical audiences that the problem exists and is worth addressing. I'm not saying that you need to describe obvious things for a person with zero technical expertise, but try not to delve into technical details from the start. In this section, our goal is to catch the attention of our audience and convince them that the problem exists. The next two sections, goals and non-goals, are optional but highly recommended. Here we clearly show what we want to achieve in this document and what is not. The goals section helps readers quickly understand the purpose of the RFC. Limit your goals to 3 to 5. If you have more, you're probably trying to cover too much in one document and you need to create 2 or more. The non-goal section helps clarify what the RFC will not address, keeping the document focused and avoiding unnecessary suggestions from colleagues. In other words, you make you free from questions like, why the thing I suppose should be here is not here. For our example, RFC goals might be middleware support. Enable middleware to handle side effects such as logging, asynchronous requests, and error handling. Single source of truth. Implement a single source of truth for the application state, reducing the complexity of probe drilling and context management. And React compatibility. Ensure that the chosen solution integrates well with React, which is our primary framework. All goals should work on resolving the problem that we describe at the beginning of the document. In non-goals, we listed things that might theoretically be included. However, they will not, because it's too much for one RFC or because they are simply out of the context of this problem. In our case, we mentioned that we do not want to manage the state for all components, and we do not intend to replace the React context entirely. The goal and non-goal sections will help our readers to better understand what problem we want to solve. The next part is the solution itself. Your solution shouldn't be perfect, but you have to carefully weigh benefits, trade-offs, costs, and influence on the team and project. How to choose a good solution is not a theme of this video, but you can check out my other videos where I discuss system design a lot. When deciding what should be done, you don't have to rely solely on your own expertise. RFCs may involve research. It would be really helpful if another company solved a similar problem using a specific solution, and you definitely should include that information to support your argument. For our case, we will use Redux. We propose integrating Redux as a primary state management tool for the project due to its widespread adoption, community support, and robust ecosystem. Next, we'll list the benefits and trade-offs of our choice. It's important not to just talk about benefits. If you cannot say anything about trade-offs, it's most likely you haven't done enough research. All reviewers should understand what the solution will cost the company. On the opposite, you will be the person who didn't foresee the problems. In our case, besides the benefits, we also mention the boilerplate problem traditional for Redux and the learning curve. If we decide to proceed with a new approach, the team should be ready to invest some time to learn a new instrument. For cases where a high-level schema is useful, we should include it. We briefly show how we think it should work in our project. When describing the main solution and alternatives, try to include an estimation of how long implementation will take. Evaluations like long time or easy to implement will not be very useful. It's better to try to estimate how long it takes in hours or days. Even if exact numbers are not possible, you can give a general idea of which option might take more or less time. The important part of the RFC is considering alternatives. RFC is a collaborative tool, so there is a chance that after receiving comments from your colleagues, you changed your mind and continued with one of the alternatives instead of the main solution. In this section, you list the other options you have considered and explain why you decided to discard them. Usually, 2 or 3 alternatives are enough. As an alternative, we will take a current implementation using useState and context API. We describe the advantages and problems of this approach as we did for the main solution. Once the first version of the RFC is complete, the next step is requesting feedback. RFCs are dynamic documents and will likely change as you receive comments or learn new information. The important thing here is not to try and make RFC perfect. Publish it as soon as you can so you will be able to receive feedback earlier. With whom RFC should be shared? People whose review are you seeking, for example, technical leads, people who need to be informed, and someone who will approve the RFC. Usually it's business person and technical person. Basically, you need to get approval from 2 sides. A technical person who will approve that the solution is useful and a business person who will allocate time for it. In some cases, that might be the one person. For example, if it's an internal technical RFC, or it's very important and should be done no matter how much time it takes. The list of approvers depends on your company's structure and particular situation. The next piece of advice is not to start working on the document silently. Before starting the document, it's a good idea to discuss it with your teams and manager. Doing this will significantly increase your chances of getting the RFC approved. While you probably will not be able to proceed if your RFC is blocked by the technical leader or project manager, the main goal of RFC is to explore various solutions and get feedback from the team. Early drafts don't need to be perfect. Share a version that's good enough to gather feedback and start improving from there. Continue refining the document as you receive feedback. The final version might look very different from the original. Once you have finished, polish the RFC and archive it for future references. The last question is where we should write RFCs. You can choose any place, but before ask yourself these questions. Who outside of engineering will need access to the proposals? If you choose GitHub, for example, non-developers might not have access to it. Does the tool support formatting, comments, and suggestions? Can documents be classified and searched? Here are some tools that can be used for writing and storing design documents. Each of them has its pros and cons, so choose what fits your needs best. Finally, I'll give you some advices on how to make your FC more effective. Use diagrams and graphics. Visual aids help people understand your ideas better. It's especially useful for complex technical solutions or changes in the system. Keep it short. People are more likely to provide feedback if the RFC is conscious but informative. Keep the most important parts of the RFC, overview and solution, short and focused. If you need to provide more technical details, add them to the sections following the main parts. Use formatting. Bullet points, highlights, and links to external resources make your document easier to read. Use structure. If needed, break large sections into smaller ones. As we mentioned, we have 3 main parts, but you can add more if it's needed. Set a deadline. The commenting period should be time-bound, so the RFC doesn't linger indefinitely. Discuss it with the person who needs to approve this document and then communicate it with the rest of the team. Your document is your responsibility. Promote it and make it easy for people to give feedback. It depends on the team, but be ready that people will not be as passionate as you. Don't forget to gently remind them to review your document and work on keeping it appealing for readers. Use presentations for business domain people. RFCs are often for technical discussions, but when presenting to business stakeholders, a short presentation is a better approach. Just take key points from the RFC and make a presentation from it. That's all for today. I hope this video was useful. If yes, please don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you soon. Bye.